Well, Shana Tova. I want to show you something. Now, I know it's going to look very small on your screen. I realize that, but to be fair, it's very small in real life, too. This is a Kiddush cup. It is silver, and I know you can't see it, but it is etched with, he's going to try to help you see it. It's etched with little pastoral scenes inside of hearts, so it's really rather sweet. It was a gift a long time ago to a woman also named Sarah, great name. It was a gift from her parents on her wedding day in 1901. Now, Sarah's family lived in Lithuania. 1901 Lithuania was rough. It was a tough time. The economic situation was bad, the political situation was dicey, and as often happened when those two things are difficult, it was very bad for the Jews. There was rampant anti-Semitism and there were pogroms, and when the Jews could get out, they were getting out. But despite that, despite all the upheaval and the uncertainty and the danger, really, Sarah got married. And her parents scrimped and saved all their pennies. I do not know how they managed it to get her this Kiddush cup to be used in her home. And she gave the cup to her eldest child, a daughter named Ida, to be used in her home when she got married. And from her, it went to her eldest, a daughter named Phyllis, who had only boys. What are you going to do? But one of those boys was named Dan, and Dan is my dad. And my dad gave this Kiddush cup to me when I got married. And we used it in our wedding. This Kiddush cup has seen rough times in history. It has been through pogroms and czars. It has fled the impending Shoah. It survived the American Depression, 2 world wars, and 9/11. And it saw tough times in our family. Difficult births, bad marriages, unemployment, and dreams deferred, sudden tragic deaths, and painfully drawn out ones too. This cup is a legacy, though, because my family, my ancestors, survived all of that. Despite those tough times, and there were some very tough times, they kept on living. But it's even more than just that. When my dad gave me this cup at our wedding and explained to me the lineage of it, all the women whose hands it passed through to get to mine, he said, "Lador vador," meaning from generation to generation. In Judaism, when we say lador vador, we don't mean items, we don't mean stuff that is passed down from generation to generation. That's not what my dad was saying. We mean that we, each of us, come from a long line of people. We are the product of our ancestors. We are the product of their struggles, their turmoil, their trauma. We inherit their messes, it's true, but also their stories. We inherit their lessons, their hard-won lessons. We inherit our ancestors' values. Those who came before us laid the groundwork for the people that we have become, and frankly are still becoming. Who we are, our character, our values are due in some part to theirs. My ancestors, like so many of yours, survived terrible events in human history, and they passed down to me their legacy, lador vador, as did yours. Think about what you got from your ancestors. What did you receive as their legacy? From mine, I inherited their ability to survive, their clear-eyed realism, their wry sense of humor, their big-heartedness. They gave me this big heart that feels so acutely sometimes it hurts, but it's what they passed down to me, and it is mine. When I look at the ancestors I have known, and I hear the stories of the ones that I have never met, I see parts of myself. And there is some bad, yes, of course, but there is so much good. And those good parts are gifts. And I am so grateful to have been given them this legacy. I've been thinking so much about my ancestors lately who survived terrible things because we are living in a terrible time. This pandemic and the political upheaval and social upheaval, we are living in a moment in history right now. And like our ancestors, we cannot fully gauge the impact of the moment that we are living in because we are living in history right now. And we're busy just trying to live our lives, right? Feed our children and earn a living and celebrate holidays and mark life cycles. But just as the people our ancestors were, and the values that they held dear, and the stories they told, and the priorities and traditions and principles that they clung to, just as those things have all shaped us, our values, our stories, our priorities, our principles will shape our children and their children and their children. We are not just the product of our ancestors. We are all going to be somebody's ancestor. And I know it's kind of hard to think of it that way, even if you have kids, because it is hard to imagine impacting people 5 generations removed from you, 10 generations. How can you imagine? People you will never meet, whose faces you will not know, whose voices you would not recognize. But to be Jewish means understanding that long-term vision is tough to have, but you have to have it. There's a famous story in the Talmud about Honi the circle maker. He was walking along a road, he saw an old man planting a carob tree. And Honi asked, "How long until your tree will bear fruit?" And the old man said, 70 years, give or take. Honi was aghast. 70 years, he said, you expect to be alive in 70 years and eat the fruit of this tree you're planting? The man answered, I found a fruitful world because my ancestors planted it for me. I'm planting this for my descendants. To be Jewish means knowing that every one of us is one link in a chain that is very long. A chain of traditions and stories, yes, a chain of values and principles. We come from our ancestors and we will each be an ancestor. And Judaism implores us to remember that it is our duty to be a good ancestor. Our people have always lived in strife. The quiet periods in Jewish history are all too short, and the difficult, almost unbearably long. And whether it's something happening to us as a people or something that is happening to the whole world, like a pandemic, the tough times are always with us. And as Jews, we know that that's not an excuse. That the world, yes, it is so difficult. And still, we cannot despair of leaving a good legacy, of being a good ancestor. And I would argue that in times like these, when the word unprecedented has been thrown around so much it has lost all meaning, where every morning seems to bring worse headlines than the night before. You look at your phone and you're, wow, it's worse. That's impressive, and yet it is. Every morning seems to be worse than the day before. Despite that, it is more incumbent than ever on us who are living through these tough times to think not just about ourselves now and our world now, but that of the generations after us, and how we plan to impact them. Because The actions we take now, based on the values that we live by, not only teach our children. I'm not talking to those of you raising children right now. I'm talking to those whose children already have children. I'm talking to those of you who haven't had any children yet. I'm talking to those of you who don't plan on having any children. The values and the principles and the traditions that we hold fast to now and live our lives by affect our families, yes, but our communities, our country. Our values inform our actions, and that is what changes the world. The world we live in, yes, but also the world that future generations will live in. So we must ask ourselves, I say to you now, ask yourself, as we are living through this singular moment in human history, what is the legacy that you want to leave to those who come after you? What is the legacy that you are leaving to future generations? What are your values? What are your principles? What are your traditions? What are your stories? And how are you communicating them? How are you living them? Because that is how you will pass down your legacy. That is how you will strengthen those who come 10, 100, 1,000 generations after you. And I'm not being hyperbolic when I say 1,000. On high holidays we've heard, Adonai, Adonai el Rachum ve'chanun, right? That one is the high holidays' greatest hits. We always focus on the first few words of that. Oh God, who is compassionate and gracious and slow to anger, which is true and it's great. We never think about the last part. Notzer chesed la'alafim. God extends kindness to the 1,000th generation. God has the long view of human history. And as we all are created, B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, we too have to take the long view. We have to think about the legacy we plan to leave for the generations so long after us that our names mean nothing to them. Because one day, this time of trouble, it will be over, or at least life will look very different. And all that will be left is our legacy. So I ask you, as the world turns over to a new year and we are fighting what feels like a war with multiple fronts, what kind of ancestor do you want to be? What legacy are you leaving for the generations after you? What do you value? What are your principles? How do you communicate them? How do you live them so that those who come after you and learn from you see that they are so valuable? And so that one day, your great-granddaughter, your great-great-granddaughter, holds up your Kiddush cup, full of gratitude for all you have bequeathed her, knowing and being shaped by what was important to you and what you valued and how it informed your life. And she'll wonder what her legacy will be and what gifts she, like you, will leave to those who come after her. I wish you a Shana Tova U'Metuka, a year of only sweetness. Shana Tova.